Hello, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. My name is Dan Calabrese, and with us is Grace Maher, Chief Operating Officer of OTR Solutions, which is a really outstanding financial services and fintech provider for the trucking and logistics industry. And we're going to have a really interesting conversation about some of the issues in that industry. So, Grace, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Dan. Great to be here.
And also a special greeting to those of you in the City Biz audience. We're always glad to have you here. Um, Grace, I want to kind of get into a couple of things right off the bat because
Cool.
I know, especially with some of the directions in the industry right now, as a company that's offering factoring services for the trucking industry, what is the industry telling OTR Solutions about the issues it wants you to address right now?
Yeah, Dan, it's a great question, and this industry is always evolving. But one of the things that I've noticed most is it's not necessarily just specific to factoring, right? Because while this industry is very fragmented, we all have to work so closely together. And what the industry, I think, is calling for, whether you're a financial solutions provider or you're actually booking freight or you're moving freight, is more transparency around who the driver is and how we combat fraud. It's just the fraud in this industry has always been prevalent. It is very sophisticated. It
And
is,
getting more so all the time.
all the time, and it's so costly. I
Yeah.
mean, I think it shocks the general public when they see a trailer of lobsters cost as much as it does. I'll never forget, just as early as I got into this industry and understanding that an entire reefer of blueberries is like $80,000 of blueberries. You're like, what? Imagine shoes and electronics, and the freight that moves is insanely costly, and there's just so much fraud.
Yeah, and that especially because we know that that challenge just keeps moving. And since that's what the industry is telling you it's concerned about, can you tell me some of the things that the OTR is bringing forward right now to try to address those issues?
So we just recently launched a product called OTR Select. And what this does is it allows brokers and market to access capacity from OTR that has been vetted with carriers that we have worked with carriers whom we monitor daily. Years ago, I think brokers looked at companies like ourselves, the factors, as a bane of their existence, right? We're calling you for verification, and it's like, I mean, isn't this why we have quick pay, right? So I completely get it. But when you think about the value that certain factoring companies can provide to a broker, the vetting that OTR does just to work with a carrier, the vetting that OTR does daily just to keep up with our clients and our carriers, understanding historically where they've been, if rates that we're running are traditional and compared against market appropriate, but then add in the fact that we now have and own our AI, technology that is vetting these carriers day in and day out, not just from an underwriting process, but on the actual freight that they're on. And so OTR Selects brings these carriers to brokers, and it says, hey, these are the carriers you want to work with because they've been vetted, and they have a relationship with OTR, which hopefully brokers realize too. That means after the load delivers, you're getting your POD faster.
Mhm.
We're surfacing if we think that there was fraud.
Mhm.
We brought fraud to brokers before they even knew it was happening to them because we were tracking it on the documents, and then we call and say, we think you have an internal problem.
Yeah.
Um, yeah,
I mean, this seems like an innovation that's beneficial to everyone in the process. Certainly to the brokers, certainly to the carriers, because if they're pre-vetted, then that smooths out the process of them getting together and working with the brokers and getting loads and things of that nature. This seems like there's nobody who doesn't benefit from this.
no, and look, the carriers love it because they're saying, yeah, give me exposure. If you think about the mid-size brokerages that don't necessarily have the ability to invest in a carrier relations team, they have access to the carriers they have access to. Otherwise, they're posting it on a load board, which we all know if you post it on a load board, you're more susceptible to fraud.
Yeah,
Okay.
for sure.
If you go and you access a pool of carriers, and OTR has one of the largest fleets in the country, if you pool all of our established trucking companies together, and we say, hey, you want an Atlanta to Charlotte, you're looking for, a Northeast lane, plug it in. We're going to give you access to carriers. We're going to tell you how often they run that. We're going to tell you who's in the area. We're going to tell you how long they've worked with us. And we can assure you we have monitored and are monitoring these carriers daily.
Want to look at another issue, a bit broader, but we're at a time where there's a lot of price volatility. And some
Mm-hmm.
of that's being driven, of course, by events in the world, but not all by that. There are other economic
Yeah,
factors. So, because you're dealing with fintech and payment tech, are there tools or insights that you can offer, especially to carriers, to help them mitigate the effects of some of these trends?
absolutely. I mean, that really is our sole mission as a company. We started working with the one truck owner operator at the very beginning of our inception. That was our focus, which traditionally most people don't realize factoring companies didn't touch 5 trucks or less. It wasn't profitable. If it wasn't a fleet, they weren't interested. If they couldn't sell a recourse program, they weren't bringing it in house. We took a different approach. We said, you know what, the majority of freight is moved by the small owner, the small carrier, either the owner operator or under 3 trucks.
Hmm.
And we built the business around how do we bring them technology that keeps them not only moving, but in business, more successful, and access to data that they wouldn't otherwise have. So, when we're talking about how expensive it's become, we give them access to data, such as, our fuel card is one of the most competitive fuel cards in the industry now. We have a fuel finder in the mobile app. They plug in the lane and we tell them exactly on the route where they can save the most money. And if they don't use our app, we're going to tell them at the end of the week why they should have. Hey, you stopped here when you really
Okay.
should have stopped here.
Yeah.
We're going to give them access through OTR Select to have brokers outreach them and say, hey, I have freight for you to move. We've got a business banking solution where, they can use this as their business banking and separate it from their personal accounts, or they can also use it as a reserve, that, hey, we'll pull 10% of your factoring payment out and we will, put it in this account. So if you blow a tire, have a repair issue, have a driver related problem, you have access to funds. But probably the most unique and exciting tool that we're offering, or product that we have, is truly instant funding, where carriers now can upload their delivery documents and instantly get paid, which before it was, you submit your invoices at a certain time and you may get paid that day, but you're probably getting paid tomorrow, and you're definitely not getting paid nights, weekends, or holidays. OTR has brought forth the first product that pays carriers 24/7 holidays directly to their bank account via real time payments.
So, so on that point, since since factoring does trade a percentage for immediate cash availability, and especially now we're talking instant, and I can
Yeah,
see the appeal of that,
yeah.
especially for anybody who struggles with cash flow. But nevertheless, there is a give and take there. So, is there any advice you offer to carriers to determine how and when the trade off makes sense?
Yeah, Dan. So for as long as I've been doing this, the first question I get asked by every carrier and truck driver, whenever they find out what I do and I'm talking to them about, they're like, what rate? What's your rate? What's your rate to factor? And OTR has never been the cheapest factoring company in market. Um, we we're not trying to be either, because I think what we believe that we're offering to the market is a premium service.
Hmm.
But just to give everyone an idea, 15 years ago, factoring rates were somewhere between 7 and 12%. 7 and 12%. It's insane. Fast forward to today, you can find a 1% rate, all the way up to 4%, depending on the equipment type and how much volume you're running and what program you're on. Um, so, right now it's so competitive that you could argue it's cheaper to work with a factoring company than not. It's just which factoring company are you going to work with?
Mhm.
How well do they support you? What tools do they provide? Because if you're working with the right company, it should pay for itself. In
Oh
other
yeah.
words, if I tell you where you could have saved an extra $50 on fuel this week and your factoring services were 45, you know, that's why you work with a company like us that helps keep you in business. Is time is money. um, and we're doing all of your billing, all of your back office. Heck, we're advocating on our broker's behalf. If we think that they've got a late fee charge, and they call us and say, dude, they had us waiting to get loaded for 7 hours. Of course, I was going to miss my delivery appointment. We call the broker and advocate and go, hey, listen, what's going on here? I mean, we do things that most financial factoring companies don't do, which is why we're a financial services provider. We're a fintech. We're so much more than that.
So it's not, I mean, the acceleration of the cash flow is obviously a benefit in and of itself. But then when you add in the other value added services you're talking about, that's where it really tips the balance in favor of it.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, one service is just simply purchasing an invoice and depositing money at some point. Another is being a service provider that helps a trucking company, especially a small one, really succeed in this market. And our data supports that, where if you're a carrier working with OTR, you are 30% more likely to be in business after a year of getting your authority than if you weren't working with a factoring company, or even if you were. I mean, we beat the market on that because we're so involved in the success of trucking companies, which, I mean, let's be honest, Dan, like, their success is our success. We make money when they make money, right?
Yeah, no kidding. The more billings they have, absolutely.
Right, right.
So it
I mean,
only makes sense.
we're genuinely invested in them succeeding in this business.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's clear and straightforward. Now, there are so many players sometimes in just really what would appear to be a single transaction of getting a piece of freight from place to place, but there are so many parties involved with that. Can you talk about how you simplify the process as much as possible for everybody?
Sure. Use one word, integrations, which everybody, wants to be plugged in. But it does matter, right? And we have great relationships with brokers. We also have ePay Manager, which is a carrier payment solution for brokerages. So, that gives us the ability to understand where carriers are moving with the brokers, and verify. It's all about sharing information. I think for so long everyone's been pretty cagey about what they have. OTR, we want to definitely be helpful in not just sharing where our carriers are at, but where the great ones are, right? The established carriers that are running a really legitimate trucking business, like, hey, you should work with these men and women. And integrations obviously give us more transparency and the ability to do that and surface information more quickly.
So, what else should we expect coming down the pike from OTR Solutions?
We are always thinking about how do we get our carriers paid more quickly, which right now it's really instant funding.
More
You're like,
quickly than
well,
instant?
yeah, can you go faster than an instant? What you can do, and no one's doing. You can pay people at pickup. So,
Okay.
we want to track and understand our carriers' behaviors more in depth, in working with them in a partnership in a way that they say, hey, we want you to understand what we're doing and what we're up to so you can help us even more. And then this OTR Select, this product is so new. I mean, it's just been released that we already have brokers using it. We already have incredible feedback. Our carriers are loving that we're giving them more options. Look, you can always turn down the freight, but you can't say no to freight you don't even have access to. And there's some incredible brokers out there that want a larger pool of carriers but don't know how to access some of these carriers. And so, we love what we do. We're obsessed with this industry and trucking companies. So you'll continue to see more. I mean, we are always evolving.
Yeah, and trucking companies need services like this. So props to OTR Solutions and props to you for seeing that and coming forth with it.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate that so much.
Grace Maher, Chief Operating Officer
Yeah,
of OTR Solutions, thank you so much for being part of this conversation today. It's been a pleasure for me.
same. Always, Dan. Thank you for what you do, and I look forward to talking with you again.
Absolutely. Thanks everyone for watching, especially the City Biz audience.
Yes.
And join us again for another one of these great conversations coming up real soon.
Thanks all.